Greetings, my cousins. I'm going to make another Edd Kimber bake. This one is from his One Tin Bakes, or One Tin Bakes Easy book. And he basically cooks them in this tray that's 9 by 13 inches. Unfortunately, I don't have a 9 by 13 inch. I have about an 8 by 12. So I might end up making a bit too much. But it needs to be at least 2 inches deep, and I think mine is. And what I've done is, like he suggested, I've lined it. I greased it first just so I can stick my paper down. I've lined it all over with some baking paper, or parchment paper, whatever you call it. I'm not too worried about it falling over. He suggests putting clips on the side, but to be honest, once that starts going in there, it will hold itself out. So I'm just going to move that to one side. Now, these are going to be oatmeal ginger slices. Now, we tend in the UK not to call these things slices, but he's based it on a New Zealand dish, but he has changed it somewhat. So in here, I've got the main component of the base layer. It's going to be a base layer with like an icing layer, and the icing layer is going to be packed with ginger. The base layer isn't. So the base layer is mainly going to be these rolled oats, and I've got 220 grams of those in there. And then I've got some plain flour here, just ordinary white plain flour, 165 grams. And what I'm going to do is that's just going to go into there, and there's my wooden spoon. I've got my special posh one somewhere, and I've just realised I've left it in the other room. I've also left that somewhere as well. It's in here. And so what I'm just going to do is I'm just going to mix this together. And then we're going to put it to one side. Now there is another dry ingredient, but we're not actually putting it into this. That's some bicarbonate of soda, which I've already got measured out. We're going to be adding that in later when we add sort of what you might call the wet ingredients. I've got a teaspoon of baking soda. Sorry, did I say baking powder? Baking soda. I think it's the same thing, to be honest. Now the next thing is we need a small saucepan, because we're going to need to melt some butter. We're going to need some golden syrup, or you can use honey, and some soft brown sugar. Now we're going to be putting in 4 tablespoons of golden syrup, or honey, depends what you want. We've got 180 grams of light brown sugar, and we've got 160 grams of unsalted butter. So the first thing I'm going to do is put that butter in there. I should say I've got my oven on, preheating at 160 fan or 180 non-fan. Okay, so that's gone in there. Spatula. We're going to start melting that down. Let me put that on a low heat for the moment. A low heat, not an off heat. Little bugger. And we want 4 tablespoons of this. It's going to take a little while, so I'll pause. And then, like I said to you, we're going to put into there that sugar. And now we're just going to melt this until it is all melted and combined. So we're just going to keep gently stirring it until that butter has all melted and the sugar, sort of for the best part of what it can do, dissolved into that, and the golden syrup is a little bit more liquid. And then we're going to be needing our bicarb to add in when we then combine all this together. And that's all your base ingredients. This is now nice and smooth and seems to be all incorporated. So at this point I'm turning the heat off, and then we're just going to add in that bicarb. Briefly mix that in. I notice it does seem to have gone a bit lumpy there. And then we're now going to just tip all of that into there. And we just want to incorporate those dry ingredients with that buttery syrup. So at that point we'll be ready to transfer it into our tray. So you need to have a good old dig around at the bottom, particularly because it does tend to have little pockets of flour or oats, unmixed oats at the bottom. Try not to stand anything on that rim where I've just had something on there. And then using an offset spatula, although to begin with I think I need something a little bit stronger. We just want to spread this out. Now this is going to be quite a thick layer, but surprisingly it's not as thick as I thought it would be, given that I'm using a smaller tray than Ed recommends. It does actually spread quite nicely, so I'm just sort of trying to spread it around evenly. So I've got a nice even layer there, and then at which point, so actually I'm a little bit surprised. I was a bit worried it was going to be so thick that I wouldn't really be able to get a topping on it. But it's actually fine. So, whoops, spilled my coffee. Whoops, digging it up. So there we go. I think that's about as good as it can get. So now what I'm going to do is that's going to go in the oven, and we're going to bake that for about 20 to 25 minutes. So I'm just going to set myself a timer, get that in the oven, and then while it's in the oven, we're going to start preparing the icing. And what I should point out is Ed says you want to do it so it's golden brown. You'll find the edges will go darker and be paler in the centre, but basically you want it until it is at least a nice golden brown colour. Now we're now going to make our icing. So getting another saucepan dirty. If I thought about it, I could have possibly got away with the first one. Anyway, I'm going to put some more unsalted butter into there. And this time I've got 150 grams. I've got 2 generous tablespoons of ground ginger. Now he says about adding vanilla bean paste. I've got enough. So I'm going to add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Where's my spoon go? And I'm going to add another 4 tablespoons of golden syrup. And then the final ingredient to go in there will be some icing sugar, and I've got 240 grams of that weighed out. Like I said, you can substitute honey for golden syrup. Now the reason we're doing the icing now is that although we bring the base out and we let it cool a little bit, we actually want to ice it while it's still hot, or certainly while it's still very warm. So I haven't turned the heat on this just yet, because obviously I've only just put it in the oven. But we do want to sort of, it doesn't matter even if you start it after it's come out of the oven, to be honest, it isn't going to take very long for this to melt down and mix up. So, I'll make a mess in a minute, won't I? There we go, in goes that. So finally, like I say, I'm going to add in that sugar, but I'm going to do that off camera because I'm going to make a bleeding mess. So this is now all nicely melted and smooth. You have to be a little bit careful because initially it's very difficult to see the butter, and as you're stirring it, you suddenly realise there's a lump of butter there because the colour is sort of hides it a little bit. But I think that's just about there. I've turned the heat off and I'm just continuing to stir it. You have to be a little bit careful when you first heat it up because of the icing sugar on the bottom of the pan. We don't want to get that catching. This has been in there 25 minutes. Yeah, it's gone a nice golden brown. I've rotated it a couple of times. It did also rise a little bit, but there you go. There's our base. You can see it's a nice golden brown. It's starting to go a bit dark around the edges, but I think that's enough. So just going to put that over on there, and we're going to let that cool. Oops. The cloth keeps deciding to go on the floor. So that's now ready, and what we're going to do is just pour this over the top, like I say, while it's still hot, and then we'll spread it out to cover the whole of the top, and then we've just got to let it cool at room temperature until it's set. It's cold and it's set, at which point we will remove it using the paper to lift it out. Again, I'm a little bit surprised, given this is a smaller pan than he uses, and when you see the picture of his cut bars, this icing layer does look a little bit thicker. I mean, obviously the bases ended up being a little bit thicker than he had, simply because it's a smaller dish, and as it rose up it's obviously got thicker, but the icing, you would imagine there's a bit, you know, less room in there, you wouldn't spread so much. But anyway, there we go. So that is now just going to sit and cool until we can cut it, and because of how sweet this is going to be, we're going to cut this into quite smallish bars. So here we go. We'll lift it out. Remember, we greased that pan just to make that a little bit easier. Probably could have got away with not having to bother, to be honest. So now all I'm going to do is I'm going to trim the edges and then cut it up into bars, and then we'll have to eat one. Oatmeal ginger slices, courtesy of Edd Kimber. Now, because of the nature, like I said, of the tray, I used, the bases are a bit thicker. These are my bits of trimming. So it was quite hard to cut, but it did cut it. When I say quite hard to cut nicely. You can see nice clean edges. I was wondering if it was all going to crumble, but it isn't. Slightly crisp, slightly chewy. You do get that gingery flavour. Personally, I think, given it is meant to be quite strong on the ginger, I don't know how much I like my ginger, I think I might have added more ginger to the topping, and I think I might have even added a few tablespoons of ginger into the base mix as well. The icing is obviously sweet, but I wouldn't have said, oh, I've got to hit ginger then. For the amount of icing sugar and golden syrup in there, I would expect that to be even sweeter. Whether it's like the butter tones it down a bit, I don't know. But I've got plenty of scraps here. Icing's a little bit hard. I might keep it in the fridge, I think, just to see if it just hardens a little bit. But there you go. Thanks a lot, Ed. Bloody nice.